Hey guys, I'm at the Jameson distillery here in Dublin, Ireland. So, right on Bow Street. It's actually like 10 minutes from my hotel, which is very convenient. So yeah, let's take that tour.
Need to know about Jameson is on the bottle or in the bottle. The name Jameson comes after our founding father, John Jameson, and he was actually a Scotsman who came over and set up shop here in Dublin in 1780. And on the bottle you see the family crest, which is in front of me here, and the words underneath are Sine Metu. And Sine Metu is Latin for without fear. And those words came to define John Jameson's life and our whiskey ever since. So it all begins back in 1780 when John Jameson, an enterprising young Scotsman, came over and set up shop here in Dublin in Smithfield. Back then, Dublin was in the midst of an economic boom and the population was growing dramatically. Dublin was the second largest city economically in the UK and Ireland back then, so it would have been a bustling place. All over the city there was about 100 distilleries and breweries, and many of these would fade over time, but one institution would remain on Dublin's north side here for over 2 centuries, and that is where you are today. It's the Jameson Distillery here at Bow Street. And so this is John Jameson, you'll see him now, and his wife Margaret, and together they shared a sense of adventure. With hard work and innovation, the distillery grew, and so did their family. They had 16 children together. So one of their children was John Jameson II, and he took over as master distiller. He was entrusted a legacy by his father, and he kept the distillery going through hard work, innovation, and unmatched quality. So, by the 1820s, the distillery had grown to across about 5 acres of land and covered most of the Smithfield area that you're in today. This is what it would have looked like back in the 1820s. Between 1880 and 1905, we were firing on all cylinders, or pot stills, so to speak. Now you will see the name Jameson is on the bottle, but the legacy is shared by many others. Look closely at a bottle of Jameson and you'll see the images of the 2 barrel men carrying barrels on their back. These barrel men represent all of the hard workers, past and present, who helped build our whiskey from the ground up, and you'll see them on the base and on the neck of the bottle. You'll also see a large sculpture of the barrel man right outside the front door. It's a good place to get a photo. Okay, so back in the day our distillery was like a city within a city. We had many local craftspeople employed here, and we were self-sufficient. We had our own carpenters, blacksmiths, millwrights, painters, coopers, and ostlers. The ostlers took care of the horses. These people took great pride in their work, and it was said once you had a job at Jameson, you had a job for life. So by 1870, we employed about 300 people here at the distillery, and we supported hundreds of families from the local area. By 1880, we were making 1 million gallons of whiskey per year, which is about 6.5 million bottles of whiskey per year. And back then, there was a lot of whiskey for one distillery to be making. So, if you worked here back in the day, you were entitled to your glass of daily grog. And this meant you got a glass of whiskey in the morning at the start of your shift. You got a glass of whiskey in the evening at the end of your shift. Unfortunately, we don't get this anymore. I wish we did. Now, if you had a dirty job, you got an extra glass of whiskey. So if you cleaned the chimneys or something like that, you got more whiskey. Some of the workers would cover their faces in dust and soot and ask their boss for an extra glass of whiskey. Now, other people here who worked here said they only enjoyed a cup of tea. And if you were a new employee starting for the first time, the other workers would warn you never to light the open flame in the tea room. Now the managers knew the whiskey was going missing, but they didn't realise that the workers were hiding whiskey in the teapot every morning. They were filling it up straight from the barrel, and they were having a cup of tea on their lunch break. This tea would have been very strong. It would have been 60% alcohol or 120% fruit. Okay. And don't forget, you can get your grog at our bar later on, so make sure you go down, present your ticket at the bar, and get yourself a drink, okay? We will be having more whiskey at the end of the tour today, so we'll be doing a tasting. So normally we give you 3 whiskies to taste, but this week they've added in a 4th whiskey. So you're going to be trying. So this week you're going to be trying a distillery exclusive whiskey called Distillery Edition, and this is the first week we've added it in. So it's basically, we're seeing how it goes, and if people like it, I'm sure you will, and then we're going to keep it forever on the tasting. So it's an extra whiskey, so it's good. Okay. So we'll go back to our history. So Jameson was busy shipping our great Irish whiskey all over the world. More and more people were enjoying the triple distilled smoothness and incomparable taste of our great Irish whiskey. Then history, in the shape of military and political conflict, intervened. War broke out around the world, not only once but twice. And here in Ireland we had our own conflict, the 1916 Rising. Due to its prime location in the city centre, this building was used as a fortress. There was even snipers on the roof during the time of the fighting. Martial law was imposed for a number of weeks, and this meant that no worker could come into the building and no production could continue. But our wage records from the time actually show that Jameson's generosity prevailed, and all workers were paid in full during the period of the shutdown. Now things began to get better, but then they got a lot worse. We had restrictive trade tariffs imposed by Britain, then we had prohibition in the United States, and some American bootleggers would label their moonshine as Irish whiskey so they could charge more for it. So there was damage to our good name and reputation, but also a loss of momentum. And then this continued for many years. There was a very slow decline for the whiskey industry. And so by the 1960s, the Irish whiskey industry had hit rock bottom. But in the spirit of John Jameson and his innovative thinking, the guardians of the whiskey bearing his name decided it was time to sink or swim, and so did some of the other whiskey makers in Ireland. So in 1966, after years of rivalry, we joined forces with John Power and Sons and the Cork Distillery Company. So we formed a new group called the Irish Distillers Group, which still exists today. We say that the spirit of John Jameson is here in Bow Street, and this is where he perfected the art of whiskey making. But our heart now lies down in Middleton in Cork, and that is where we now mature and distill all of our whiskey for a growing global demand. And it really is the perfect place for us to make our whiskey. Although our whiskey making is steeped in tradition and craft, our makers are looking for new and innovative ways of making whiskey. We try new recipes, new ingredients and new techniques. And this is all to appeal to a growing global audience of whiskey drinkers. Our story at Jameson is a story of our people. It's a story of our makers, our masters, our blenders, and all who share the 244 years of our heritage. This story is also your story. It's a story of everyone around the world who enjoys Jameson, and everyone who enjoys the triple distilled smoothness and incomparable taste of our great Irish whiskey. And so here at Jameson, what we like to say is, we are all barrel men. Today I'll break it down into 3 key steps. The first step is quality ingredients, and our Middleton distillery is located down in Cork in the south of Ireland, and we say that it's the perfect place for some of those ingredients. The first ingredient is pure, clean water, and in Irish the words for whiskey are Ishke Faha, which means water of life. The Dungorny River flows through our distillery down in Middleton, and we say that it's the source of life for our whiskey. We also get our barley from a 100-kilometre radius of the distillery, and we import non-GMO maize or corn from France. The reason why we don't grow our own corn here in Ireland, we don't get enough sunshine all year round. You might have noticed it's pretty rainy here all the time. Sometimes you get a bit of sunshine. So we have 2 types of barley. We have malted and unmalted barley. Malted barley, well, unmalted barley Comes direct from the fields, and it has its hard shell or husk intact. And it gives the whiskey a creamy, spicy flavour or mouthfeel. Then you have malted barley. Malted barley, first of all, you need to soak it in water for 2 days. Then you store it in a humid environment for about 5 days until germination occurs. And with germination, we are tricking the barley into thinking that it's springtime. So it will release the sugars and the enzymes that we need for our fermentation process. We will then trap these sugars and enzymes by applying some heat. Now traditionally, this would have been done in a malt house or malting house, which was a large room covered in ceramic malting tiles, which would have looked something like this back in the old distillery. This is what it looked like. On the table there, you can put your hand on the original ceramic malting tile. It's slightly warm to the touch. You can see all the holes where the air will be blowing through the room. You can also see the malted and unmalted barley. Sorry that you can't touch the barley. People on the tours were eating the barley. I don't know why you were doing that. They were eating the barley. But the barley does make nice flavour to your whiskey. So what it does is malted barley gives your whiskey a biscuity sweet flavour, but unmalted barley gives you earthy, grassy notes to your whiskey, okay? Now, does anyone, well, you obviously do, you like Scotch whiskey, I'm sure, yeah. So, anyone else like Scotch whiskey? Yeah. Well, maybe you've tasted it before. So the flavour between Scotch whiskey and Irish whiskies, some people say it's slightly different, okay? Some people say that Scotch whiskey, some of them have a smoky flavour, and that's because when they heat their barley, they use peat or turf in the process. But here in Ireland, in Jameson, we use hot clean air. So there's a slightly different taste or smoothness as well between the two. And that's why. Okay? So you get the barley, next step, and we grind it down into a grist. This is a flour-like substance. Then we take the grist and we'll combine it with some warm water and it becomes mash. This is almost like a porridge consistency. Then we'll take our mash and we'll filter it down into a liquid called wort, and we will add our yeast. The yeast will consume up all the sugars, and you get a chemical reaction where you get CO2, and then most importantly, you get your alcohol. So this process is the same as another alcoholic drink. Does anyone know what it is? Beer, yeah. So it's the same steps as making beer up until now, okay? So what we've created is a type of a beer called a wash, which is 10% alcohol or 20% proof. And to turn this into our whiskey, our next step is our distillation. So, in Ireland, traditional Irish whiskey making uses these large copper pots. These are called pot stills. So this is pot still whiskey, okay? So we put our liquid into the first one. Now down in Middleton, we have the largest ones in the world. Each one has 80,000 litres of liquid inside. The first one here is called the wash still. The alcohol will boil at a lower temperature to the water, so the alcohol vapours will rise through the swan's neck and will collect in here in our spirit receiver, leaving most of the water behind. We will repeat the second time in our faint still and the third time in the spirit still. Each time we are getting a higher concentration of alcohol, we are also getting closer to the smoothness that we need for our whiskey. We triple distill our whiskey here at Jameson because John Jameson said if you triple distill your whiskey, you get twice the smoothness. When we're making our pot still whiskey, we only use malted and unmalted barley, and the whole process from beginning to end takes 3 to 4 days to complete. And when you talk about traditional Irish whiskey making, that is pot still whiskey, okay? We also have a second way that we distill our whiskey here in Jameson, and it's called the column still or continuous still method. That is faster. It only takes 17 hours to complete the process, and we use it to make grain whiskey, which is maize and malted barley.
Alright, that's it from the Jameson Distillery tour. It's about 45 minutes. I actually had a Jameson ginger ale and lime cocktail, which was delicious. Other than that, it was about 45 minutes. It was a good story, good history. If you like this video, smash that like button, subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching. Catch you next time.